Want awesome tabletop games delivered right to your door? Sign up now for Gamebox Monthly. Learn more at GameboxMonthly.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Elaborate. It's episode 11, double digits. We did it, 11 weeks. Wow, this has lasted longer than most of my relationships do. Regardless, we're here, we're doing it, we're learning, we're growing. I'm sitting down this week with a production coordinator, photographer, a maritime historian, and the woman who reignited my desire to podcast. So you can either thank and or blame her, whatever suits you. Sitting down with the host of Movies Made Me, Cheryl Jones. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, no problem. I like when other people ask me to be on their shows. All the stress is off of me and onto them, and I like that.
Yeah. So I have to give you credit, because despite the fact that I do have a history as guests on a wide variety of other podcasts, you know, dating back from 10 years ago, I always kind of wanted to do a show of my own. And it really wasn't until you asked me to be on Movies Made Me, which is your amazing podcast.
Thank you.
And sitting down and doing that show with you, I just really enjoyed sitting down with somebody that I've never met and getting to talk about something that I felt.
Yes.
And so I really kind of have to give you credit for Dragon Wagon Radio.
I feel pretty awesome.
You're
cool.
sort of responsible for kind of, everything for kind of where it is now. With that said, you don't necessarily have a background in like radio. No. You were a photographer.
I did that for a while. Yeah, I did some motorsport photography. I studied radio, TV, film, communications in college, but there was no actual radio in that.
Right.
It said it, but it didn't have it. So it was mostly like film and TV, but I had and I worked tech crew on concerts in college.
Oh, gotcha. So like a stagehand.
Yeah. So I at least was, familiar with chords and mics a little bit. But
right.
To an extent. What always happens.
I don't know what that is. Is that yours? I think it's yours.
Is it? Oh, damn, it is.
I'm hearing the thing, and I'm like, mine's
not
that loud.
I'm laughing at you, and it's me.
Yeah, she's making fun of me because my phone is ringing, and her phone is ringing.
It's the car dealer.
What were we talking about? Your professional background in radio? No,
yeah, you're right. See, at least I had it on vibrate.
That's fair.
That's better than ringing. So in college I worked tech crew and on concerts and things for 5 years I was in school and enjoyed doing that. But it's still I didn't really understand any of it. So this is all. It was just an idea that kind of popped in my head. At
where
one point.
Where was that in college that you were doing that?
Cal State Fullerton.
In Fullerton, California.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So are you a Cali girl?
I am a native. Yes, a native North Orange County. Yes.
Wow.
Born in Anaheim, lives in Fullerton. So
wow.
I know. Well, yeah. At where I work right now, there's like two of us who are natives.
Really?
And that's weird having two in one building.
Right. So if you were doing TV, radio, if you're doing that sort of stuff in college, where did the motorsports photography come from?
That came from after college. The one thing they didn't teach you in college with that was how to get a job in the industry. So once I figured that out, which took a couple of years, I spent about 5 years in the film industry, and then motorsport sort of started to happen for me. Like my dad started doing some vintage racing. He has a vintage race car.
Oh, what do you mean by vintage? Are those like the long, skinny ones that look like Monopoly pieces?
Exactly.
Really?
Pretty much. It may be a little better than the Monopoly one. There are Monopoly style ones in the club. But
interesting.
His is a 1969 Winkleman WD-F1 Formula Ford.
Wow.
Yes, I'll show you a picture later. And but they're the old Indy style cars, but no wings and they don't have slick tires.
Gotcha.
We do have another class in the club that's like that. But and I started just taking pictures of my dad while he was racing or when he was out on the grid, and then because there were other cars there, I took pictures of them, and I gave those pictures out to everybody, and they loved them, and so I started just doing more of that. And then we had a magazine in the club at the time, just a little thing for the members, and so I started submitting to them and working with that, and then eventually started going to
crazy.
pro races,
Right.
which was kart at the time, later called Champ Car, which is now dead and gone. But
Oh, geez.
which is why I don't do it anymore. That was my
Oh,
passion series.
So it's sort of your activity in photography sort of ended with
yes.
the thing.
Although I've really enjoyed that. The guy that I work for now, who's a friend, and I became friends with him through doing this. He was in a celebrity race at Irwindale Speedway.
Okay.
He's done it twice now, and it'll come up again soon, I think, this year. And so I followed him on Twitter. It's Swampy Marsh, who was one of the creators of Phineas and Ferb.
Oh, really?
And Milo Murphy's Law, which is on currently. And I work.
That seems like a weird cross of two worlds
right?
colliding.
Yeah, oh, it is. Yeah, and so he was doing it, and I followed him on Twitter. And I was like, hey, can I come out and take pictures of you? He's like, I don't know, probably. He didn't know me from anybody. So I came out, and once he saw I was out there with a pro-looking camera and all that, he was more enthused, and and he loved the pictures, and so now and then he invited me to come back and do it again last year.
Nice.
And
so you're kind of getting back into that a little bit.
Yeah. So just for that, like, it has to be something I'm interested in.
So we actually kind of share that. The origin. So the reason I got into photography myself. Wasn't motorsports, but it was bands. It was music, live music.
Yeah.
Friends would be like, hey, would you mind coming to our show and taking the photos?
Yeah.
And since I was there, I would take photos of the other bands on that show.
Exactly.
And then I'd give them the photos. And then eventually people started paying me to do that.
Nice.
And it was sort of like, so it was sort of that same exact thing of like when you were there for your dad.
It was through, I put together like a portfolio of some stuff. I went to some kart races and like a NASCAR race. I hated that. But, and I just put together a portfolio and I just brought it to the track one time to show to a friend.
Yeah.
And the guy who ran the club at the time saw it and he's like, oh, let's go show this to Jeremy. What was this guy, Jeremy, who worked for Racer Magazine? He was the kart editor for Racer, which is a big, international magazine. And he said, oh, hey, send this into Racer and give him my name. So, okay. So I did. And the next morning they called me and bought a picture out of it for the next issue. Yeah. So, I made a tiny bit of money off of it. But
And was your dad was that what he did primarily? Was he always a race car guy?
No. He wanted to do that when he was a kid, of course, but he says the reason he didn't was because too many drivers died at that time.
Right.
Of course, it had nothing to do with not having any connections to racing or
Yeah,
anyway in.
It's,
but
it's
not
just,
because
that's like me being like, well, the reason I'm not an astronaut is because it's a very dangerous job.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the fact that I have literally no qualifications to be an astronaut.
Right. Exactly. So he picked it up as an older guy, a friend of his.
Was it like a thing they did in retirement?
Yeah, he started a little before retirement because a friend of his that he worked with did it.
What did he actually do for a living?
He initially worked for IBM, like repairing computers back in the
he was like a
days when
tech
you
guy.
physically got inside the computer to fix it, which is why he's losing his hearing. And
wait, I'm sorry, what?
Like back from like the 60s and 70s and 80s when the mainframe computers, you would literally be inside of it. They were so big that you would be inside the setup of the computer to fix it.
So how did that translate to hearing?
Because it was so loud inside there with the computer running and everything, and nobody thought to use
headphones or not headphones, earmuffs or whatever.
Yeah,
earmuffs.
So
I feel like earmuffs, in case it's cold, in case
it's
there's a
cold,
breeze.
you might, but
you never know if there's a nice chill in the wind.
I couldn't think of what to call it either. So
Earplugs.
Yes.
There we go.
Hearing protection.
Between the two of us and 3 minutes of stammering, we figure out a way to get it.
Isn't that?
But that's
earring.
That's interesting. I would have never thought that. That's like, my dad fixed computers and now he's hard of hearing because of it. Like, that sentence doesn't even make sense anymore.
Right.
It's
right.
out of context.
And he's like the least capable person with a laptop computer that you've ever met. Like he just cannot handle it.
The guy who used to fix. Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted I don't understand.
Is he kind of that stubborn? Like the new stuff? He's like,
Yeah, he is. He's kind of Mr.
He's
50s.
like, my tube television never gave me any problems.
No. Luckily, he likes fancy TVs.
Does he?
So
Okay.
yeah, he's got a nice big one.
You said that you worked for 5 years in film and television when you got out of college before you discovered the photography thing. What were you doing in that element?
A whole bunch of different things, working as a production assistant, and then
you were doing like those preliminary years of entertainment industry work.
And then the biggest thing I did, kind of near the end, I was hired as a production assistant to work in actually first on a camera test for 2 days, then in pre-production for a movie called Mouse Hunt. For DreamWorks. It was their second movie, and it was the first feature that Gore Verbinski did, who later went on to do Pirates,
nice.
which is like the most influential movie of my life. So it's weird that it's the same guy. it was Nathan Lane and Lee Evans, and they inherit a
Right.
big old house, and there's a
Right.
mouse in it. And yeah,
Right.
So through the course of working on that, I ended up becoming the visual effects coordinator. So that was the best title.
That's a weird bump.
Well, yeah, because they brought me in pre-production. The first AD did, since she'd met me on the camera test and liked me, and she just had me working with her on storyboards, just, I don't know, copying them and doing whatever, basic stuff. But because I became familiar with the visual effects boards at that point, when Gore chose his visual effects producer, he chose a woman who had never worked in production before. She'd only worked in visual effects facilities.
Gotcha.
So she didn't have people to bring in.
Yeah, like she was overseeing other visual effects artists working,
right,
but not necessarily connecting the director to that.
Right.
Gotcha.
And so the first AD was concerned by that. So she said, well, since you know the boards, I'm going to ask them to assign you as her PA. I said, fine, okay, it keeps me working.
Yeah.
But then through the course of it, the work that I was doing was actually as a coordinator. And so very near the end of the production, when that producer left like a month before our drop dead delivery deadline on the effects,
sure,
at which point I had to press this big red panic button because there was so much stuff undone that she'd kind of not been telling people, and I'd kind of been trying to bring up but couldn't. So I coordinated all that. We were having like 2 screenings a day with Gore to get effects done and approved and everything. Like, it was crazy. And then they asked me to stay on for a couple of weeks, and it was kind of
did you like
point
doing that?
I did. Yeah. I mean, coordinating is a thing I'm sort of naturally good at, which is why I'm now a production coordinator again.
So I was going to ask.
Yeah, 20 years after my last credit.
Wow.
Now I'm back in the industry.
But why did you not stay in it? Was it because the photography came along and you're like, well, this takes up a lot of my time now?
Well, it was just, I'd given out this advice that I had heard along the way of, if there's anything else in this world you can do and be happy, go and do that. Because if you're going to work in the industry, that has to be, you have to be crazy about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so when motorsport came along, I was like, well, there's something else.
Sure.
And while it's not a full-time thing, I'm seeing that I'm kind of pulling out of
right. And if you're enjoying it, then like you can't take away from that. Like,
right.
I have found that that's a pretty common thing.
Yeah.
I find it mostly with like actors where like they come out here and they have all these big dreams of being an actor. And then they discover a thing that they can do that gives them a significantly more immediate joy.
Yeah.
Because acting is long and tedious and nightmarish and like sadistic, Yeah.
As much of the industry
right,
is. Too.
Yeah. And then they find themselves sort of pushing back on that extra thing that they're doing because they're like, oh no, I'm an actor though.
Right.
And when they should be doing is they should be latching on to that thing.
Right. They're preserving their old story rather than going with this new chapter, which is that's kind of where I started to realize that life comes in chapters.
Yeah.
And so, you just kind of have to roll with it, where anytime you think you see the straight road ahead, some really weird sharp right turn is going to come up. And you just kind of got to go with it.
Right.
Because if you keep trying to go straight, it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not to say like don't stick with what you want to do.
No, stick with it.
But be realistic. If something else comes along that honestly just makes you happier, because I think like that's the thing too, is a lot of people just get stuck in what they think they want. Yeah. Versus,
or you just get stuck in something you don't want.
Right.
Like that's what
I
mean. I ended up, as I went to work for Disney during that sort of transition time, getting out of film and wanting to do motorsports. So getting a job I was unemployed for a couple of years and then got a job with Disney, and just at Disneyland, just a guest service kind of role.
Oh, like literally at Disney, not like with the production group.
Right. We were technically part of Disney corporate in Burbank, but we were based in Anaheim in the offices there.
Right. Bound by Disneyland.
Yeah. And it wasn't like the department I came in with wasn't one that I wanted to work with.
Right.
It was just they had a bunch of layoffs, so the only way to get in was as a temp, and this was the first department that could hire me.
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, I'll transfer to something else in a year or so, and then it was impossible to do that.
Oh, jeez.
So I ended up stuck there in that job that I didn't like, working with people I didn't particularly like, for 10 years.
Wow.
And that's when, when Pirates of the Caribbean came out in 2003, and it was still quite a ways after that. It wasn't until 2012 that I actually made this move, but that's
a big difference.
Yes, well, but that's when it started to percolate,
wheels.
and I started to like read maritime history.
How
and stuff.
long into long into your job at Disney was that when Pirates came out?
I had started in 2002.
So it just came out. So it was just
it was just a year after. But
so that's a long time to permeate.
It started to sow the seeds, and that's when I started reading maritime history and stuff.
Yeah,
and
then let's get into that a little bit.
Okay.
So you're
that's
like
the best story, really.
You're and not just about stories, but also it's something that I'm just so wildly unfamiliar with.
Most people are.
We spoke a little bit about it when I did Movies Made Me months back, just briefly before air. Like you developed this just absolute love for the sea.
Sort of, yeah. It started with walking into Pirates of the Caribbean. I thought this is going to be stupid because it's based on I love the ride. But
how do you make a movie based on a ride?
Right, it's going to be stupid, but I want to see it's Johnny Depp, whatever. Okay. Right. And at the end of it, I thought, my God, that was so much fun.
It was fun,
I loved it. And I saw it, I think, 7 times in the theater.
Whoa, 7 times in the movie theater.
Yeah, that was one of the big ones for me. And it all came down to Jeffrey Rush's character. I couldn't care less about Jack Sparrow. It was all
Remind
Barbossa.
Me who his character was.
Barbossa.
Oh, Barbossa. Okay.
Yes, Hector Barbossa. And thankfully, he's been through all of the series. So, okay, and I just was fascinated by him. And that's what led me to start reading about pirates, because I thought, well, I want to know. I mean, obviously, there's a lot that's inaccurate in this movie.
Sure.
Of course, it's it's just a fantasy,
cartoon,
right? But are there nuggets of truth in here?
Surely.
And what were these guys really like?
What the writers, how much research did the writers do? That sort of thing.
So I started reading, all your standard pirate books,
right?
And I highly suggest Under the Black Flag by David Cordingley. That was the first one I read.
Okay.
Brilliant writer. I've read all of his books, I think, and so I just started getting really interested in that, and then reading. I read about pirates until it got to the point where everything was just repetitive.
Right.
Because everything comes from the same source.
From the same source, yeah. So eventually you're getting people retelling a story that they heard in their own words, kind of thing.
Yes.
Right.
So then I started to expand, and I went into their ships. And then I thought, okay, well, we've got all this coastline. There must be some tall ships around here.
Right.
Coincidentally, it was in the winter, and the Lady Washington from Washington State was down here. She portrayed the Interceptor in the movie, the one that they steal.
Oh.
And she was still painted for the movie and everything.
Wow, it's
and
like a straight up pirate ship.
So Royal Navy ship.
Navy
thank
ship.
you.
Right. Sorry. I almost got my arm bit off.
So I went down and sailed on her, and that was another.
Wait, you got to get on her and ride?
Well, you can. She comes down to California every winter, and you can go out for like 3-hour sails.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they do battle sails when they have another vessel with them, and then which are fun, and then they have.
So wait, battle like they.
Yeah.
Did they
have
take positions of how they would?
Yeah,
in the battle?
they sail around and try to get a good shot. Like to rake each other. And
it's not choreographed. Like they're
no, it's not choreographed.
It's like a dogfight.
They're really sailing.
Oh my God, this sounds so cool.
And they have like little 1-pounder cannons, but they're surprisingly loud. And they
sure
have flame and everything that comes
black
out.
powder's black powder.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And they fire at each other, and it's fun. And then they also usually do adventure sails where they might fire a cannon on that once in a while, but you get to help haul the lines and things if you want to experience what it's like.
Okay, you don't have to tell me if it's fine. I'm just curious, how expensive is this?
It's more expensive now than when I did it, because I look, and I haven't gone out in a long time when they've been down here, but I can't remember. It's like $65
that's
or
not
something
that bad.
now. Yeah, I mean,
that's not that terrible for the experience.
I have tried so hard to get people to go out and do this with me, and it's so difficult to get people to go. Like at first, I got a few people.
Let me tell you, I know the group of people that will go do this with you.
This winter, we are doing this.
Yeah, you definitely. Our people that listen to this show who have been listening since episode 1, like we have a ton of episodes, who've been listening for the past 2 months, are very familiar with my best friend Paul Bianchi.
Yes,
who should be on your show sometime soon.
Yes,
because he's
should.
Fantastic.
I've heard him. Yes.
He loves pirates.
Oh, perfect.
And
is he married?
His family, no, he's not. His family, his mother is one of these ancestry genealogy people who is just so good at what she does.
Right.
They traced their family lineage back to an actual pirate named Raya Graves. Wow. You found some people. We'll go on this thing.
Perfect. Well, and eventually, because I started, it was something that I was really excited about, so I took pictures. So I took personality pictures like I do with race car drivers. of them. Like I take pictures, I take candid photos. So when people
When you say
aren't paying
personality
attention,
pictures.
yeah, well,
like,
portraits, but they're candid when people aren't paying attention to me.
Of course.
Because that's when you get the most real shots
So
of people.
They're almost seem more editorial. They become more
Yes.
natural, more
Yes.
playful. Yeah.
But they're usually very close.
Oh,
like
nice.
it's close because I
I
have
like
a
that.
longer lens, and
That's great.
And they loved them, and so and the
You
guy
did
who
that
did
of like the people on the ship.
yeah, because
Are
they
they
also
in character and that sort of thing?
kind of, yeah, because they wear what they call funnies, which are sort of generally sort of 18th century looking, maybe 19th century looking clothing.
Are they
so
like
it kind of
are they
fits.
like military look? Or are they all
No,
like
no,
kind
no.
of
It's just like
civilian?
common
Oh,
sailors.
interesting.
But eventually, I did go out and do a week. I signed up for 2 weeks, and I only stayed a week on board the ship as crew, living and
Right.
working and working aloft in the rigging.
Jeez.
And
It seems like
yeah.
signing up for a lot of hard actual work.
yeah, well, I liked it, but I took because I'm a super planner, and so
Right.
I took like sailing classes like when I got in. So
Wow.
I had like some certifications, so I knew how everything worked before I went aboard the Lady. And so then we were really short-handed. We had like a full complement for one vessel split between two. And so there wasn't time to like teach anybody anything. So I wasn't learning anything new. So I got bored really quickly and then homesick, and then I left. So luckily, like the day I left, I started to come down with what they call the boat plague, because the guy who bunked below me had it. And so I'm really glad I left, because I had a racking cough for 5 weeks. And that would have been very bad.
Also, I just want points for the fact that you said I knew how everything worked before I boarded the Lady, and I didn't get. I said nothing. I just want points for that.
That's pretty. That shows a lot of restraint.
Yeah.
As I said it, I knew I was opening myself up to something like that. But
So I wish I would have known how it worked before I boarded the Lady. Okay. So you developed this love for maritime history.
Well, but then so then it went after sailing.
Right.
And when I discovered I don't actually like sailing.
Oh, wait, I don't know
yes.
this. I don't know this.
Sailing is actually really boring to me. Like so boring. Like we were out, we had some time, but we transited from LA to Oxnard, and we got up there a little bit early, so we had time to waste. So we were just sailing, the two boats were just sailing around, and I'm like, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is what we live for." And I was standing there going, "I hate this. I absolutely hate this."
Really?
Like the only picture anybody took of me was in that moment, and I've never seen it, and I can only imagine what the look on my face was.
I
was just like
apathy.
But what I loved was when we would be dockside and we would give tours. So I would take other people's shifts on the tours because they hated that. I was like, oh no, I'll do it because I love sharing this. Right. So I realized that's when I kind of realized I should be a photographer and a historian.
So I was gonna say. So what you're interested in is the history of it.
Yes, because then I went into the Royal Navy as well. Like started to get interested in them.
So you're not you're not interested in reliving it. You're interested in knowing about how it was lived in the first place.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I want to know the realities of it, and who were these men, and what did they do?
And so this whole time you're working at Disney, as you're discovering your love for this,
yes,
and the Disney Pirates movies are coming out, and I'm sure that at that point now you're interested in other movies that's anything about.
Well, of course, Master and Commander, which was the same year, I think, as Pirates, actually. So that actually hit
was it really?
I think so. When I last looked
Pirates
it up.
that long ago? God.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I feel like Master Commander is an old movie, and I feel like Pirates is a new movie.
I always think it came out in the 90s, and then every time I look it up, it was like 2003 as well or something, and I'm always surprised by that, like every time. But, but then they had, they did the premiere of the first 3 Pirates movies at Disneyland in the park, and so the second movie, I got to work that night, ostensibly as a media host, but I didn't end up hosting anybody. But like they did what do
you mean by media host?
Well, like when a member of the media, or in some cases when a celebrity would come and they were going to walk the red carpet, one of us would be assigned to go with them and just make sure they hit the right spots,
like a chaperone, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I was there all night. I saw Bill Nighy. That was exciting. But
that is exciting. I love that man.
But and I should have yelled "Slarty Bart fast," but I didn't.
So at some point you decide I'm out. I'm getting out of Disney.
I got to the point where I'd read so many books that I thought, okay, I need to go pro. I need to understand what's right and wrong in these books.
And
now.
what did you? And when you say go pro, and what specifically? What fields?
I need to learn how maritime history works. I need to learn how you research this stuff, and I need to learn to be able to tell the difference between a book that's telling me, actual truths and a book that's just repeating what its gotten from other books.
And what
primary document research is what I needed to learn.
And in what job did you want with this?
The theory was the
I love
excuse
I love
I
that
used.
You're setting this up with you're like, see, what happened was
yes, exactly. What I told everyone,
Yeah.
even though I tried to believe it myself, but I knew I didn't, was that I would work in a maritime museum. But
Okay.
most of those are on the East Coast, and I knew damn well as a Californian I wasn't going to move to the East Coast, because it's cold. They have winters.
Oh, I see how it is. All right. Well, we can come out here, but you can't go out there.
No, well, and this is what I told myself was I'll go to school because I was interested in the Royal Navy by this point, and because it's the only place I could find really good maritime history courses that dealt with the 18th century as opposed to the 20th century.
Right.
I decided I would go to school in England, and so I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll go over there and I'll experience a winter while I'm there, and then going to the East Coast won't be any problem. This was inaccurate. So, because I did experience a winter and I hated it like you wouldn't believe.
Right.
So I'm never doing that again,
Right.
ever. And so, and I kind of knew all along that wasn't really what I was going to do.
Right.
It was just a thing that I needed to do.
Sure.
And I think that's a disconnect that a lot of people make with college, is that whatever you go and study, you have to do that.
Right,
You
right,
have to
right.
get a career in that, or else it was a waste of time.
Right. Yeah.
And that's never the case, because college isn't just about learning to get a job. It's about learning to think in
Sure.
a different way.
It's a learning how to exist in society. It's about learning how to find. It's interesting. In a former guest and my partner in Dragon Wagon Radio, Zen Zenith,
Yes.
talked about unschooling.
I just listened to
Did
that
you?
yesterday.
Oh, thank you
Yes.
for that. And he talked about like learning to teach yourself,
Right,
and learning to learn,
which is what I started doing later in
Right,
life.
yeah.
Like whatever strikes my fancy, I will go and learn all kinds of things. I mean, I did that with like motorsport. I thought, oh, maybe I want to be a mechanic in
Right.
racing or something. And so I took some auto shop classes and I read a bunch of books on, aerodynamics and all of this
Sure.
stuff for race cars. And it was fascinating, but it's
But it
not
wasn't for you, yeah.
ultimately where I wanted to
So
go.
with that said, putting a slight sidebar, I want to
Yeah.
get back to maritime stuff. But
Okay.
did you ever, as a kid, know what you wanted to do?
I don't recall knowing.
See, and I think you and I are very similar in this.
Yeah.
In the sense that, despite the fact that I always didn't know I want to be an actor, I didn't pursue acting until I was really in my late 20s, really,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
seriously. And before that, I was doing exactly what you were doing, where I would find something that interested me,
Mhm.
and I would be like, okay, I want to know everything there is to know about this thing right now.
Right.
And for a while, I was really big into cycling, and I was
Yeah.
like, maybe I want to ride for a pro downhill team or this kind of stuff. And I
Mhm.
got big into learning about all of that. And then obviously, before that, when I was in my college years, everything was music for me.
Right.
I wanted, and I was like, I need to know everything there is about instrumentation. I was like, maybe I want to be an instrument builder,
Right.
or and I learned how to fix certain musical instruments. I worked at like a shop on Long Island that taught me, all of those things ended up being things that I still love
Right.
and cherish, but I don't want to do for a living.
Right,
And there's still
but I
things,
think
and
it's
they're
a-
like traits that I carry with me.
Yes, but
Yeah.
and I think it's having a sort of natural curiosity about, oh, this thing interests me. How does it work? I want to learn everything
Right.
I can. I want to learn it inside out.
Sure.
And I've met a lot of people who don't have that, and to me, that's completely foreign. I'm like, why
Right.
would you not? Why do you not like want to go out and read a bunch of books and do a bunch of things?
That's what's interesting about
you know?
that is when I was younger, I couldn't. When I say younger, I mean 20s.
Yeah.
Not so much when I was really, really young, because it kind of started and I fell out of it again. But when I was younger, if I saw a movie, listened to a song, I
Uh-huh.
needed to know everything about it.
Yeah.
Like if it was a movie, I want to know who's directed it. I want to know who shot it. I want to know who. Like I want to know. I would study the credits.
Yes.
I had I had Excel spreadsheets of
Okay,
like you know what I mean, like that
you
kind
went
of stuff.
further than me, but
you know what
that
I'm getting
idea,
at. Yeah. Same thing with
Yeah.
music. Like I wanted to know every member of the band's name.
Yeah.
I wanted to know like what they did before this. And then I feel like I kind of got over that hump in my
Right.
late 20s.
Right.
And now I'm sort of like, oh yeah, that's nice. And I don't really get into it
Yes.
because it's time consuming to
Right.
be
Well,
a nerd.
I just do it in the sense of living, like especially with movies. Just I completely live in the fantasy world of that movie.
Sure.
Until another one comes along.
Sure. So anyways, so you had this very sort of kind of a storied chapter based life, which is great
Yeah.
thus far.
Yeah.
So you were telling all these people about the this is what I'm gonna do, work maybe in a museum, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You decide that's not
Right.
going to happen because
While
I don't
I'm
like
still
the
over
colds.
in England, but
Yeah.
yeah. which was an
right.
adventure in itself
Right.
because, I moved 5,000 miles away from home, and I was how old was I then? 45? 44?
Yeah,
I can never remember when I did that, when I went back to school for my master's degree. Yeah.
That is such a brave, big deal to me. So many people don't God, I mean, I can't think of many 40-year-olds who like to change their freaking eye doctor, let alone, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't like to change my eye doctor either.
It was the first thing I thought of.
But I've had to because I don't have insurance.
Let me just say that the reason that I pulled that is I just got new glasses and I was like, I'm never going to a different
Are
place.
Are those the new ones?
Yeah.
Oh, I like them.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But so anyways, so that's a big change.
Well, and it was easier for me though, because I'm not married. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit footloose and fancy free in that way. It was a risk,
right?
Because I left the that Disney job that was there, but it was a total dead end. I had nowhere to go.
You were gonna be the person who did that forever.
Yes, and I couldn't stand that.
And that's respectable that you had the wherewithal to just get out of there and not accept it.
I had to. I mean, I've and I was, when I came back from England, I've been back almost 4 years now, and I only worked sporadically. I mean, I just got this job that's full time that I love.
Right.
2 months ago.
Right.
So until then, I did an internship at an art museum just to see if I wanted to work in a museum.
Sure.
I don't. And and did some little, some temp jobs and whatnot. So, I mean, and it was a risk because I've been racking up debt all this time, right? So it's easy. It would be easy to look at it and say, oh, I made a mistake. And in the darkest moments, sometimes I would think that for a second and then think, no, I didn't, because if I was still at Disney in that job, stuck in that den, I probably would have killed myself by now. Like, really, honestly, it was getting pretty dark.
I get that.
So, so this was the best.
It sort of was not even an option.
No. And since I came back from that, being able to pull myself out of that rut and just be completely removed from all my normal things for a year and then come back, that was like hitting the reset button on my life. And I had a whole new attitude. I still do about everything. Like, I can see the beauty in everything now. Like, I'm like, traffic isn't even like, I'll complain about it a little, but it's not a big deal to me. And especially right now, because I'm driving to a job I love.
So your life is like BD and AD, before
yes,
Disney and after Disney.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that would be BE and AE, before Exeter and after Exeter.
Oh, all right.
That's where I went to school.
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. That's fantastic.
But, so I've just had a hugely positive view since I came back, and that's really grateful for that.
Fantastic. So what, since then now, since you've been back, what have you done have you explored that further?
No, not really. I mean, I
once you figured it out and once you became the expert that you desired to be, did you decide like, this is still a thing that I love being an episode, but I'm not like working in? Did you have that sort of realization?
Right. Yeah. Cause I still love it.
Yeah.
I don't read it as much now. I mean, because now I'm really kind of specialized. So, and I can see the bad books from the good ones. So now I've got to read like academic works.
Gotcha.
Which are much more boring.
Yeah.
But they have the good information in them. And so it's still an interest and still something I love, but not my focus.
So how long between the time you come back and then the time you start getting, because you said you went back to working in the film industry again.
Yeah. Well, and that was literally because of meeting Swampy at that race and then asking him to be on my podcast. Like, he loved the pictures. He thought they were the best, literally thought they were the best pictures anyone had ever taken of him. Wow. And his mom did too, which was funny. She sent me a message. I'm like, okay, cool. And getting to know him a little bit, having him on the podcast and getting to spend, part of a day hanging out with him and, and just learning a little bit about him. And we had some connection points, and he had actually lived in Exeter for a year, which nobody even knows where Exeter is in England.
Yeah.
So that was a huge one. Like, whoa, we have this connection. Like, what are the chances? And so, over the course of the last couple of years, we've become good friends, and I volunteer with an organization that he's now on the board of, that he had been, and I started that because he was so passionate about it. And so, and so one day I told him, hey, I really would like to work with you, and I used to do some film industry stuff, and I'm a coordinator. I can do this.
Right.
And so now he, when he got me an interview at Disney Animation, like, he didn't have any spots, but he thought, oh, maybe we can get you on something else until I do. But that kind of went nowhere. And so I'd still been waiting around, and then he mentioned online one day about, oh, I think I've agreed to run a third show or something. I was like, maybe you'll need help. He said, who knows? And it was like the next week I got a call from the producer at his company, which is called Surfer Jack Productions.
What is it? Surfer Jack?
Surfer Jack. Yeah,
nice.
He's a surfer. And they called me, hey, we need a production coordinator. And I interviewed for it and got it and was thrilled because I was working part-time at a Hallmark store at the time. And I did not.
Wow. Oh, so you went back to like the retail grind after that?
Yeah, just because it was the only place I could get a job.
Sure.
I literally couldn't get a job anywhere. Whether I was aiming high or aiming low, no one wanted to hire me. And I was like, I don't
So you've been doing that since now?
Yeah, so I got the job 2 months ago, and I'm driving from Orange County to Venice every day.
That's kind of a lot.
Which is it's pretty killer, but
do you ever think you're going to leave Orange County?
If I can ever afford it, but now I have so much debt, plus this, on the credit cards from funding myself, plus
that's true.
The student loans.
I mean, well, let me ask you this: and
if I move up in the company and start making more money,
wholeheartedly, because here's the thing: is admittedly, I don't have a ton of debt. I don't have just only because I didn't go to school. Like I don't have that sort of stuff hanging over me. With that said, I am a very big fan of you only live once.
Exactly.
And people let their debt crush them, and I get it because it's crippling.
Right.
But simultaneously, like, do you regret doing all of that stuff?
No, and that's the thing. Every once in a while, that's the same thing. Every once in a while, I'll get down about, oh my God, how am I going to get out from under this?
Right.
But I know I will eventually, and I don't regret a single moment.
Eventually, we'll just die, and then they'll
That's
go after somebody else for the money.
Think. If I die, I don't care what happens after that. It is what it is, and I'm gonna grow with this company.
There's some solace in that.
Oh, absolutely.
There's some solace in knowing that someday we'll just die.
Absolutely, it's not not a bad thing. It happens.
Avoid all your problems. Death. Yeah, that's like a.
I just saw a thing today on the internet. Somebody posted one of those stupid things that had all these facts, which were, questionable. And one of them said that like sitting in front of the computer for however long every day increases your risk of death by 40%. I said,
your risk of death?
Yes,
we all
have
100%.
Exactly. That's what I posted to the person. Your risk of death is 100%.
What does that even mean? I also want to know, even in the fake bullshit context they have, how?
If you said by heart attack, I might be able to buy it.
Sure. Maybe there's something to do with, that's hilarious.
That's stupid.
Oh, jeez. So at least you're doing something now that you are back. Do you love it again?
I love it. I love where I'm working. I love who I'm working with. Everybody in the company is awesome. And I don't mind the drive because I love these people I'm working with. So what I'm doing is fine. I mean, I'm really good at it. I hope. And we're working on one animated show right now, which is Pete the Cat, which is a children's book series that came out after I was a kid. I didn't know anything about it, but it's apparently really beloved, apparently. Okay. So we're turning that into a book. I mean, into an animated show. It's already a book. And then I think we just signed the contracts to do a show with Richard Hammond from Top Gear, which he came to the office one day, and I could not have been more excited.
Nice.
I had my car detailed.
Nice.
Because I couldn't stand him seeing it dirty because he's an American car guy. Yeah.
That's
I was
so
like,
endearing.
oh my God, I have to get my car washed, like fully washed and detailed.
That's so endearing.
I told him too. So he's like, well, good on you. He didn't care, but I got a photo with him and it was great. And I was like the nerd in the office that day.
I mean, you know what? Honestly, I can say this with all sincerity and without sounding hyperbolic. It will sound hyperbolic, but it's not. I promise you. Like, you really are like a fucking beacon. You really are, honestly, because you took such a path.
Yeah.
Such a unique path to get to a place that you seem like you're. I mean, honestly,
I'm thrilled right now.
Like, you seem like a really happy person.
Yeah. And
also, I know we've spoken not a ton, but we spoke briefly about last time about like dealing with depression in certain ways. And on your show, we talked a little bit about like, you seem like you have such a good understanding of it. And I feel like it's so important. And I know that I sound like I'm bashing people who decide on a thing they want to do and then just do it. And I'm not
which is
bashing,
not a bad thing.
I'm not bashing you on that at all, but there is something to be said about like the journey to find the place we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And it's so incredible. The thing that I can kind of most closely associate this with is my sister. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love my sister to death. She was like a top-rated defense attorney in New York City.
Yeah.
Partners in like a firm, has her name on the building.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
She was on an episode of Dateline NBC that won an Emmy because she's defending this guy, John Adrian Velazquez, who is in prison for a crime he so clearly didn't commit.
Oh, wow.
And she's this superhero of a defense attorney.
Yeah.
And at an age, which I won't say because she'll get angry at me, fairly recently just took an entire 180.
Yeah.
And is now a yoga teacher.
Wow.
And
but yeah,
could
if you're
not be happier.
Yeah, if you're not feeling fulfilled anymore by what you're doing,
and
do something else.
And I feel like, and I remember we spoke a little bit about it once long ago, and people have thrown like the what do they call it, the midlife crisis term out there.
Sure, yeah.
And it was just a thing where she just found herself like, well, listen, like she loves being a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that she's fell out of love with, but it was that thing of like, well, I did that for a long time.
Right.
And now she discovered this love in yoga and opened up this fantastic, it's not necessarily a yoga studio, but they do yoga there. It's this place called The Workshop on Long Island. Heck, if you're listening and you're from Long Island, please check out The Workshop. I wish I could tell you where it was. I'm a terrible brother. I want to say it's somewhere in Huntington. I'm not positive. But it's this place where people can go and be a part of communities that have different creative endeavors.
Yeah.
They have nights of all these different things, and they also do yoga there. They host events there.
That's awesome.
And I'll tell you what, like being a defense attorney, it can't hurt being a businesswoman. You know what I mean? Like it probably helps her.
Yeah, she's got the wherewithal
and on
to do it.
top of that,
knowledge.
she's as healthy as she's ever been. She loves yoga so much. It's brought her and her family closer together. Their family all does stuff together.
Great.
So it's like, and it's that whole thing of like, it's such a great story of like, if you would have told me 10 years ago that one day my sister would be a yoga teacher.
Right, you'd have laughed.
I would have laughed. I would have been like, that's ridiculous.
If you'd told me 15, 20 years ago that I was ever going to be interested in history or tall ships, I'd have laughed.
Right. And what about simultaneously still working at a studio and having your own podcast?
Yeah, right?
Like, yeah, it's...
Well, 15 years ago, I would have said, what the heck's
What's
a podcast?
Right.
But yeah, I never would have thought that I'd have this creative venture that...
Yeah.
I mean, out of that podcast, I've met so many people that I never would have dreamt of meeting before. And, some are celebrity types and some are just, everyday people.
Sure.
And everybody's so fascinating and interesting. And I get to just sit down with someone like you who I had never met before. And have this really in-depth, interesting conversation.
So let's talk a little bit about your show here. Like, so your show is called Movies Made Me.
Yes.
And the show pitch is you task your guests with picking the 5 movies that made them who they are as people.
Correct.
And you have a clear distinction between favorite movies.
Yes.
And do you use the word most influential? What's the word that you use? Most influential.
Yeah, movies that have influenced you.
Right.
So it may or may not be your favorite movies.
Some
of them may be in there,
crossover.
but it's not necessarily.
Yeah, so I had some crossover, definitely.
Yeah,
I had some crossovers
I have
with
a lot of
City Slickers.
crossover on mine. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I also have I had a movie on my list, like, for example, Like Crazy was one of the movies on my list, which probably isn't one of my favorite movies, but I saw it at such an important time, and it did a thing to me that was so important that I had to put it on my list. So
it can be a movie you hate, but if it influenced you, it'll be on your list.
It's a really great show, and you really do get people through this format to kind of unpeel pretty major facets of who they are.
Yeah. And
like, because so much of the entertainment that we get from movies stems into something that's so personal to us.
Right.
And for me, I know I got emotional on your show. I remember speaking about City Slickers.
Right.
And how I watched City Slickers and it checks so many emotional boxes for me that very transparently stemmed with my father issues.
Right.
And also my masculinity issues as far as like, growing up sort of a runty guy with a giant brother, and my uncle was 6'1" and a big burly, so like that movie really touched into all of those things for me. And the conversation isn't necessarily just about the movie. It ends up becoming about,
it's more about
those issues.
You. Yeah.
And it really is a great show, and I really urge everybody to check it out. And you've been doing it now for about 2 years,
a little over 2 years.
You had recently had your 2-year anniversary. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
What stemmed you doing it in the first place?
Well, it was the experience with both Pirates of the Caribbean, which from everything we've talked about, it's pretty obvious that had a pretty major effect on my life. It influenced me a lot. And then
so it started from you internalizing what your most influential movies are.
And Jaws. Those were because Jaws was when I was 7, and I'm 48 now, and I still have the fear.
Right.
Which is funny because I volunteer with a surf therapy organization, so that's funny because I just worry the whole day that something horrible is going to happen to people.
You're just waiting for that one day.
I do not work in the water, so I am on land on purpose. But yeah, because I just for whatever reason at a certain point I just thought, wow, I have these 2 movies that have had deep influences on me, and when I think about it, other movies have influenced me in some in really silly ways, some in really deep ways.
Right.
But other people must have movies like this too, and so I started kind of bouncing the idea off of a friend. We were bowling at the time, bowling regularly.
Delightful.
Because of The Big Lebowski, and another one of my influences. And she was like, well, younger people today don't go to movies in the theater as much. They stream them at home, whatever. So they aren't going to have these influences. And I said, well, it doesn't matter how you see a movie. You can watch it at home and it's still going to influence you. So
also, you're not having children on your show.
Right, exactly. Well, but I had appreciated while she was doing that sort of stuff, I was like, what's your issue? But
right.
Then once I started the show, I realized, I'm really glad she did that because it made me justify the concept of the show and how it was going to work and why it was going to work.
Right.
And that kind of got me more serious about doing it.
Finding your defense made you go like, no, this is a real thing.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a thing, and I will fight up. I'll stand up for it. I'll fight for it. So I'm going to do it. And so I went online and learned how do you make a podcast. And
so you never had any like previous podcasting, broadcasting? No?
I delayed like 6 months starting it because when I first went on and I read like you need this gear and that gear and that, and it was going to cost like $650 to get it. Yeah. And I was like, well, I can't afford that. And then a few months later, I came back and did another search and found better information.
Right, yeah.
And that's part of why I now do a little bit of work with podcast advocates, which my friends at Radio Brendoman do. And we go to cons and do panels and things and just try to encourage people, just start. Even if all you have is a gaming headset, record with that. Just start.
Absolutely. And it's, you know what? There's this clip that maybe I'll repost it when this comes out in case people are interested in seeing it, because it hit me really hard a couple years ago. I was watching Kevin Pollak chat show episodes.
Yes.
He did an episode with Michael Chiklis.
Okay.
And halfway through the episode, they're talking about Michael Chiklis's love for music and how he started because he plays in a band and they play shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And him and his friend rekindled like a musical relationship, like from other sides of the country, where like he would write something and he would send the file, and he was talking about just what it was like to start making music again. And Michael Chiklis like turns from Kevin Pollak and he stares directly down the barrel of the camera, and he even goes like, "Where's my camera? We'll find it." And he points at the camera and he says like it doesn't matter what it is, you have no excuse.
Right.
The way technology is nowadays, there is absolutely no reason why you're not doing the thing. And I can't remember verbatim what he said, but I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
And I remember in that moment, I was like, okay, Michael Chiklis.
Yes, sir, I'll do what you say.
But in literally any facet of anything you do, and it doesn't have to be creative.
Right.
If you enjoy working on cars and you are shitty at it and you're shitty at it and you're not helping anybody, who cares?
Right.
If you get anything out of it, pursue it. It's so incredibly important.
Yes.
And honestly, that's kind of the message of, I think, your story.
Yes.
Which is sort of great because it kind of ties it up that way. Like you found something that was interested in and you went and did that. And then you went and did this. And then,
yes, whatever interests you, follow it. Take it as far as it takes you.
I feel like that's...
Yeah, do it.
Just do it. We should probably coin that. That sounds like a really great slogan.
We should trademark it.
Let's trademark that.
Let's get that before anyone else does.
You heard it here, folks. Elaborate and Movies Made Me, the co-trademarkers of Just Do It.
That's right. What could go wrong?
So how do people find your podcast?
They can find it in all the usual podcast places: iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. and mmmmpodcast.com.
Podcast. Do people think that's about
Podcast.
cooking?
No, I've had a couple of people point that out. Podcast. Didn't even occur to me at first. I thought, I like that though.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the usual places, your favorite podcast app. And
Fantastic.
it comes out every other week on Mondays.
Thank you so much for coming and sitting with me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I was really excited to do this. I love the show. I love listening
you so
to it.
much.
And
So those of you out there, please make sure you're following me on Twitter at Liquid Jake, as well as at It's Dragon Wagon on all social media. The most important thing that we can push right now, if you're listening to the show, if you're enjoying it, we can really use iTunes reviews. iTunes reviews go a really long way as far as letting people find the show organically. We literally don't even get a star rating on iTunes until there are enough star ratings. So leaving a rating and a review on iTunes is so incredibly crucial. Use the hashtag #ElaboratePod. And other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you again in a week. Be great to each other. Enjoy it. Cheryl, thank you so much.
thank you, Jake.
I love you.
I love you too.
Hey guys, I'm sitting down with somebody who you are already wildly familiar with, my bestie, Paul Bianchi.
Hey, how's it going, Bessie?
It's going great, bestie. You have a fantastic show on this very network about something you feel very strongly about.
Yeah, it's actually it's literally fantastic because nothing like a good fantasy of Greek mythology.
Greek mythology. The show is called Myth Understood.
And in that show, I talked to another bestie, Sarah Oliver, about Greek mythology, which she declared that she loved, and she also declared that she never learned anything about.
Fantastic. How do we listen to it?
Well, you can listen to it on Stitcher and iTunes, and you can also check it out at mythunderstoodpodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.